Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We'll get started, inshallah, in just a moment. Alaikum salam, Auntie Nasreen. Ya Allah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, salatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Today, inshallah, we continue with the third parable of the third out of the four parables of sadaqah, charity, and really going into detail here. Each parable elaborates and expresses a different element or aspect of sadaqah. It can be positive and it can be negative. It could be more, it could focus on how it benefits the world and how it benefits us personally, or it can be at the emotional level like today. So we're on verse 265 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the tawfiq to be able to really give these verses their true rights. And no matter how much we try, it can be negative, it could be more. That's always it could quite a difficult task. So we ask how it benefits the world and how it benefits us Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be in this verse, at the emotional level like today. So وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُم ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٌ فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلٌ Wallahu bima ta'maluna. And no matter how much we try, negative. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quite a difficult task. So we how it's saying, and the example of those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be in this verse for the or seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ابتغاء مرضات الله 65 وتثبيتا من أنفسهم كمثل جنة بربوة أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين فإن لم يصبها وابل فطل Allahu bima ta'maluna. And no matter how much we try, negative. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quite a difficult task. So we how it's saying, and the example of those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be in this verse for the or seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala أموالهم ابتغاء مرضات الله 65 وتثبيتا من أنفسهم كمثل جنة بربوة أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين فإن لم يصبها وابل فطل Allahu bima ta'maluna. And no matter how much we try, the computer. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala focus on how it's saying, and the example of those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be in this verse for the or seeking. Okay, I think I know what was wrong. Is this better? Okay. Alright, Bismillah. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin again. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, and the parable or the example of someone who gives seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let's go ahead and focus on this first part. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is pointing out the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when you look at the Quran and you assess it, does it sound low? Okay, let me go ahead and... How about now? Okay, I apologize for that. All this tech stuff is really out of my league, so be patient with me. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Okay, so when you assess the Quran and analyze it and try and ask the question, what is the greatest accomplishment a person can achieve? And what you'll find is that the pleasure of Allah is the greatest thing. And the evidence for that is in Surah At-Tawbah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ جَنَّاتٍ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارُ خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا وَمَسَاكِنَ طَيِّبَةً فِي جَنَّاتِ عَدْنٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He promises the believing males and the believing females paradises in which rivers flow under, and homes which we will find tranquility in. And then after saying this, He says, وَرِضْوَانٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. And the pleasure of Allah is greater, meaning greater than all of that. Allah being pleased with us is greater than paradise. It's greater than any commodity that we can obtain. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse in Surah Al-Baqarah is saying those who spend and give charity, seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's showing us that that the person is pursuing the highest level. And the ridha of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you look at, again, going back to the Quran, and you look at it in a chronological order, what you find is that the phrase that we very much use to address the companions, radiyallahu anhum wa radu an, Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Allah. This phrase is mentioned in the Quran a few times, but you find that it's mentioned in verses that came much later in the prophetic biography. You're talking about late Medinan chapters, like Surah At-Tawbah and Surah Al-Ma'idah, Surah Al-Bayyinah. These are later Medinan chapters, and it tells us that it took the companions 2 decades or so to reach the point where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them and they were pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to let us know that this is something that comes after years and years of disciplining oneself, years and years of increasing one's knowledge, engaging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, experiencing life, experiencing His names and attributes. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us now, when we give for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our goal should be the pleasure of Allah, because it's the highest thing that we can pursue. Now, if someone gives sadaqah for the sake of charity, for the sake of paradise, say, Ya Allah, I'm giving this sadaqah because I want paradise. Or, Ya Allah, I'm giving this sadaqah so that you protect my kids. Oh Allah, I'm giving you this sadaqah so that you give me good health and a longer life. All of that is perfectly fine, and you do have narrations in various hadith that mention these things, right? So that is okay. But in this particular verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the pinnacle. He's giving us the pinnacle to show us the pinnacle of the reward that we can obtain, as the verse continues. ابتغاء مرضات الله وتثبيتا من أنفسهم. And out of firmness from within the self. Now scholars differed as to what exactly this means, but let's look at one, which perhaps inshallah is the stronger opinion. And tathbit min anfusihim, from out of firmness within the self, what it means is the person's iman is firm to where they know that when they give for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His cause, they know that it's not just a waste of money or money that you're throwing to or putting somewhere else and that's it. Rather, because of their iman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promise, because of their iman out of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises and His rewards, their iman that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace that which they spent, as the verses and hadith say. Allahumma a'ti munfiqan khalafa. They said that when a person gives sadaqah, an angel is sitting there saying, "Oh Allah, replace that which he spent." Right? So it's out of the iman inside. So when you look at this, subhanAllah, it's very important to appreciate, what is the sense in this context, in these verses. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala implying when He mentions His pleasure, seeking His pleasure, and out of firmness of the heart? It implies, Wallahu ta'ala alam, that when the person gives, they're giving from the heart, right? They're giving from the heart. It's an emotional type of behavior. Oh Allah, when you think of Allah being pleased with you, when you think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarding you and accepting what you do, it's something that really impacts the heart more so than the mind. Yes, the mind can be stimulated by the concept of sadaqah, as we went over 2 days ago, before yesterday. But in this particular verse, it's about the act at giving. Where should it be coming from? It should be coming from the heart. And to stimulate the heart while doing that. And when it comes from the heart, it's more sincere. And when it comes from the heart is now reaping the rewards of of the action itself, of the ibadah itself. And the rest of the verse will give us an illustration of what should be going on, or what it's like to give sadaqah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, continuing the verse, says, وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٌ فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلْ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, their example, so someone who's giving sadaqah from the heart, is like a Jannah. Now the word Jannah can be translated as paradise, and when we say paradise, it refers to the paradise of the next life. But a paradise doesn't necessarily have to be in the next life. The word Jannah initially linguistically refers to a garden that's so densely, the plants are so dense and the trees are so dense that someone who is inside of it cannot be seen by someone outside of the garden. So what it's referring to is that this garden is so, it's flourishing so much, and it has so much return, because the more dense it is in trees, the more dense it is in plants, the more produce that the farmer or the owner of that garden is going to reap. So, and then you add to that just the beauty of a garden. Now, I don't know if you, for example, in Umrah, when you're traveling between Mecca and Medina, or Medina and Mecca, you sometimes pass by these pieces of land with palm trees, and there are so many palm trees, it's as if someone inside of it is completely veiled from the sun, and it's so beautiful. Palm tree is such a beautiful thing to look at. Now imagine if you have a variation of different types of trees. There's a reason why we put plants and trees around our homes, because it brings us this sense of joy and this sense of pleasure when we look at it and being around it. So the example of one who gives is like a paradise. بِجَنَّةٍ كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ. The example of a paradise that is, or a garden that is on a rabwa. A rabwa is the highest point of a hill or a mountain. Okay? Now, when you assess this, why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying at the highest point of a hill or a mountain? Well, let's look at it in terms of agriculture. In order for a garden to flourish, what does it need? It needs rain. It also needs sunlight. Okay? So choosing a spot for a garden, there needs to be strategy behind it, to where the person chooses the most economically efficient, or the most efficient place. When you look at the top of a hill or the top of a mountain, what do you find is that it's not blocked by other mountains or other hills. Thus, the amount of rain it gets is maximized. Likewise, the amount of sunlight it gets is maximized. So when it's at the top, you can imagine, different hills around it or different mountains around it. If it's the highest, when the sun comes up and sets, it's always it's always reaping or benefiting from the sunlight. Whereas in a mountain that's a little bit lower, right? As soon as the sun reaches a certain point where it comes behind this mountain, the sun is still out, and there might be an hour or two left of sunlight, but this mountain is blocking the sunlight from this mountain, and thus it's not getting the full amount of sunlight, and thus the agriculture of that farm is not getting as much resources as it could. So it's at the top and it's getting the most sunlight. Likewise, being at the top prevents flooding. You know, if you have mountain ranges and you have a valley, right? When you get heavy rain, what happens? It floods over here. And if you have a garden at the base of a valley, then that that garden is going to be flooded once heavy rain comes, and thus these plants are destroyed. So being at the top, it gets a maximum amount of rain, right, without the possibility of being flooded and thus destroyed. Likewise, other objects or other mountains aren't blocking the amount, it's not blocking rain from reaching it. So, you know, let's say the wind is blowing this way, and you have a mountain here and a mountain here. So a lot of rain is going to be prevented by this mountain over here. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, you know, when you give charity, it's like a garden that has maximum efficiency. And with maximum efficiency comes maximum production. Subhanallah. So when you give sadaqah, this is the state. You are maximizing your own revenue. You're maximizing your own pleasure. You're maximizing your reward because you are dealing with someone who is the most generous, subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're giving to someone who is the Lord of those who are generous, the source of generosity, subhanahu wa ta'ala. كَمَثَلِ جَنَّةٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٍ. So it's at this place and heavy rain comes about. So heavy rain comes, and we know what happens after heavy rains. It irrigates the land. It produces so much. أَصَابَهَا وَابِلٌ فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ. And as a result of the heavy rain, it gives twice as much produce. Now here in California, in Southern California, we have certain years that we have a lot of rain, other years not as much rain. In fact, it could be several years without as much rain. And maybe you have certain trees in your backyard or your front yard. When you get a lot of rain, what happens to the amount of the tree produces? More. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when charity, it's putting this all together, when charity comes out of your heart and sincerity, seeking the pleasure of Allah, this is the result. The result is multifold of what you expected. The result is a return multifold in what you gave. What you gave is returned multifold, right? And فَإِن لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَلْ. But if heavy rain doesn't come down, then enough rain comes down. فَطَلْ, you know, enough rain to irrigate the land and keep the produce keeping the trees to continue to produce its fruit and vegetables. What is all of this referring to? The rain here is referring to sincerity, right? Because the amount of rain that's coming down, that's going to now irrigate the land, is based on the amount of sincerity. The more sincere a person is, the more reward it's going to bring out. But let's say the person's sincerity is half-half. You know, as we mentioned in the beginning, sometimes you can give for seeking the pleasure of Allah. Other times, you can give for the sake of, you know, worldly gain. Oh Allah, I'm doing this because I'm investing in you, and I hope that this return comes to me in this life, or to protect my kids, or for paradise. So sincerity can differ, and the amount a person is sincere, it determines the amount of rain that's going to come down and irrigate that land, and thus the produce that comes afterwards. Hayakallah, Sheikh Nu'man. Assalamu alaikum. So that's how it works. Now, what is the garden referring to? Now, this is a very scenic image, very beautiful. And us here in SoCal, we get to go around these mountainous areas, go at heights, and this biodiversity that, alhamdulillah, we are very privileged to have. So we can understand and appreciate the beauty of this verse and what it's illustrating in our minds. But what is it representing? It's representing the heart. That garden is the garden of the heart. That beautiful scene is what's going on in the heart. When someone gives for the sake of Allah, not only is their intention noble, but their action is just as noble. So the nobility and the honor and the dignity of giving and helping someone else out who is in need, and also the honor and dignity and nobility of doing something selflessly for the sake of Allah, out of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The heart, that's what happens to the heart when we give with this intention. It becomes like a garden, subhanallah. And those who give, they know how beautiful the feeling of giving is, how we feel afterwards. And I'd like to share with you some research that's done about giving. In Psychology Today, they have 5 benefits of generosity and giving. And I just want to quickly share these 5, but before that, just one study that was also conducted to just show us how important it is to give and to have this generous personality, this generous heart. A study that was conducted did the following. They had individuals do the study, and what the individuals would do is one of 2 things. They did thing 1, they did part A of the experiment, and then afterwards part B. Part A is the person receives $5 every single day for a period of time. And when they do that, they do an MRI to see what's going on in the mind. Okay? And then the second part, in part B, every day the person gives $5 in charity. And then they look at what's going on in the mind to see how it's reacting. What they found was the following. Both started off happily. So when a person received $5, the happiness triggered in the brain. And when the person gave $5, happiness triggered in the brain. But what they found was very interesting. As time went on, receiving the happiness that the person felt when receiving the $5 dropped much more than the person who was giving the $5. So giving makes happiness. It builds happiness within ourselves. And other studies show that when we give to someone else and we see how that person is enjoying what we gave them, what ends up happening is that it triggers a part of the mind that reacts to happiness. So when we see other people happy, we feel happy as well. When we give other people and they are happy because of that, we feel that happiness. And anyone who's a parent understands this. As parents, when we buy gifts for our children, Allah, it probably makes us more happy to see them happy than they are excited when they receive the gifts. And that's what's going on. When we give, we feel happy. When we feel like we helped someone, we made a difference in someone's life, it starts triggering the happiness in the mind, subhanallah. Right? So it's very important to do that and to realize that giving brings us more happiness than receiving. And look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, al-ibtisamatu biwajhi akhika sadaqa. Smiling in the face of your fellow Muslim is an act of charity, or your fellow human being is an act of charity. Why is it an act of charity? Well, it makes sense. When we give charity, right? We give someone some financial help. They feel a sense of happiness because of that. You are providing them with happiness. Likewise, when we smile into someone else, it brings them an amount of happiness. They feel optimistic, and we experience this every day. Well, maybe not for us, those who are in Chicago and the eastern side where people aren't really that happy, but in the West, in other parts of the world where people are a little bit more friendly, when someone smiles to you, it just makes your day that much more brighter. So smiling to someone else is an act of charity in that you are providing them with an amount of happiness, subhanallah. So that's one benefit of giving, and that it brings us happiness. A second benefit, and I'm going to read this, generosity towards others provides relief from preoccupation with our own fears, subhanallah. Look at the comparison here. The verse is saying you're in a garden. It's just when you think of an image of a garden and just this illustration that's provided in this verse, it's just like a vacation, an all-inclusive vacation. You're sitting there and you're just relaxing. All the fruits are around you. You pick and choose the fruits that you want. It's such a beauty, it's such a relaxation. And likewise, what studies show us is that when you give, it relieves the individual from being preoccupied with their own fears. Subhanallah. And look at what, وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ. It's coming out of certainty of the heart. seeking the pleasure of Allah. So when we give, it's as if we are saying, "Oh Allah, protect me. Oh Allah, my trust in you is so much that I'm willing to sacrifice the most valuable resource that I possess." And look at the reward Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. Instead of feeling the fear of becoming poor, instead of feeling the fear of financial distress, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us by giving us certainty in our hearts, by giving us a sense of security in our hearts. A second benefit of generosity is that generosity and compassion give us purpose. Subhanallah. I mean, look at the beauty of this. One of something that is a common theme in people distressed today, especially those who fall into severe depression, or they fall into strange behaviors, suicide, right? Youth in general feel this. People even fall into extremism. What you find is a common theme, and that is lack of purpose. Psychologists, therapists who deal with youth and deal with people who are suffering from depression, they say it's quite common that these individuals, because they pursue this life, they think that the world is just about self-gratification, going and do this, hanging out, buying this, having this home, having this car. Their life becomes meaningless. And because their life is meaningless, they feel a sense of lack of purpose, and then therefore they fall into depression and sometimes even suicide. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So when we give, essentially, when it's coming from the sincerity and the heart, it's reminding of our true nature and the nature of ubudiyyah, being a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sacrificing for the sake of Allah, out of love for Allah, out of certainty for our certitude with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we give, it's showing us we have a purpose to play. And that purpose, if you want to look at it in terms of dynamics, when we feel like the world is bigger than us, when we feel like our goal, the world is so big and so complex that it is about us helping others out, and it just brings us down to earth and helps us recognize the world for what it is. What's really going on in the world? It's not about me. It's not centered about me, or it's not centered on me, but rather my purpose is beyond me. It transcends me as an individual. It's far greater than that. It's about humanity. It's about bringing people happiness. It's about bringing people closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fourth benefit is focusing on what's happening in others' lives lessens the likelihood that we'll be overtaken by self-pity and even panic. Ya Allah. Another beautiful thing. When we give, there's a reason why we give. Because there's a need. And there's a dire need. And when we are exposed to these realities, when we see the orphans who are living in a roofless home, and rats are kind of walking around their home, when we see a widow trying to take care of her 8 kids, and she doesn't even have a refrigerator, and she is living under something that a person shouldn't be living under, and they don't even own the home, they just found it there and it wasn't occupied, so they occupied it because they had nowhere else to go. When you see natural disasters and people's homes and lives being destroyed, and their homes are destroyed, when we're exposed to these things, we know life for what it can be, and thus we see our lives in a much more positive and optimistic way. Sure, I don't have the 2020 BMW. I have a decent car, right? But because we know the full spectrum of life, the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich, we are okay with where we're at. And this is precisely what the Prophet ﷺ teaches us. He says, when it comes to our iman, look at those who have more iman than us. Whereas when it comes to worldly possession, look at those who have less than us. This is what keeps us grateful and keeps us on track. So when we give, we are exposed to the hardships of life. People going through the hardest of hardships. And it makes us understand, recognize how much we truly have, and that our problems don't even compare. Our problems aren't that big of a deal, and we can get through them. The fifth benefit is Charity, giving, opens ourselves to others' issues and provides mutual companionship and builds back up in our lives that will be needed in times of stress. So the first one, the previous one, helps us assess where we are really and that our lives aren't terrible. The second one is actually you are now teaching yourself the true realities of life so that when a distressing situation comes, when a hardship comes, it doesn't seem so bad. Right? A person gets into a car accident and their car is totaled and their insurance premiums are going to go up and now they are at a big financial loss. Well, let's compare that to someone whose home was bombed by a tyrannical government and they didn't lose just their cars and their homes, they lost family members. Right? So it helps us prepare for life itself. And then the final benefit is that focusing on others instead of our own problems has positive psychological effects. It reduces level of cortisol and adrenaline in the bloodstream, which allows us to relax and improves our resilience. I mean, going back to the garden, charity is that garden. It helps us relax. It gives us the beauty of life. It shows us the beauty of what you possess by showing us the needs of other people. It gives us the beauty of what we have and the beauty of our actions, in that it helps us rest and relax. By giving, we feel the purpose. By doing it out of sincerity and out of seeking the pleasure of Allah, we enhance that purpose by reminding ourselves that we are servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that we are in need of Him, and that we are loyal to Him, and we love Him, and we trust in Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So indeed, giving does this to the heart. The more we give, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this heart a paradise. You know, the scholar said, in this life is a paradise. في الدنيا جنة من لم يدخلها لم يدخل جنة الآخرة. In this life is a paradise. Whoever doesn't enter that paradise won't enter the paradise of the next life. Now, from person to person, it's going to differ how much they recognize that. And sometimes it's there, but they still, they're just blinded to it. SubhanAllah, they haven't realized that there's garden in my heart that I'm not benefiting from. Just like a person can have a tree that's producing fruits or vegetables, and they don't take the time to actually pick it and enjoy it. Likewise, a paradise can be in our hearts, but we haven't realized that it's there. So this is the reward of giving. What a beautiful reward. It is upon us to do our best to give from our ability, from what we can, and to not be discouraged by what little we can offer, because perhaps $1 will be $1,000 in charity, because it's about the sincerity. Look at the verse. I mean, this takes us back to the verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and those who give, not they give so much, or that they're constantly giving, but rather those who give with their heart, seeking the pleasure of Allah, and out of iman and trust in Allah, thinking about Allah's names and attributes, they give. Because Allah is the most merciful, I want that mercy. And this is an effective way of getting it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-muhsin al-bar. He is the most kind, the most compassionate, He's the most excellent, the one who gives, the one who honors. Right? I want that. And Allah is telling me I can gain that by giving. It's not about how much. If you have a lot, then yes, give a lot to help those people. There's so much reward there. But if you don't have a lot, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not grade by numbers. He does not grade by quantity, He grades by quality. So anyone, no matter how poor or how rich they are, has access to this garden. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and that firmness from within ourselves to be able to do this, seeking His pleasure. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that sincerity. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. If anyone has a question, please do ask. If not, then inshallah we will see you tonight. Ameen, sister Nasreen. Ameen. Wa iyaakum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. Ya Allah. This is the month of generosity. Give out of full hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are the people who will feel true happiness in this life. May Allah accept. Wa iyyakum, Sister Fariba. Ameen. May He help us, make us among those who help the less fortunate. Ya Allah. There are so many out there. And I was shocked to hear the statistic that statistically, the group of people who have the most amount of orphans are Muslims. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. How sad. Look how many times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to take care of the orphans, to be kind to the orphans. Yet, despite that, Muslims have the most amount of orphans out of any demographic group. So we need to rise to the occasion and give. Islamic Relief, alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair, is doing great work to help the orphans. And I encourage each and every one of us to sponsor at least one orphan. It's not much. $30 sometimes. It's $1 a day. The more, the better. So let's. And the Prophet ﷺ, "Ana wa kafilul yatim kahatain." Me and the one who financially takes care of orphans, right, are like this in paradise. Look how easy it is for us to gain this major blessing, this major reward. So Islamic Relief, go to them. You could choose a country that you want, because I know a lot of us, we're still connected to our ethnic countries, and that's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. In fact, we should be connected with them to help that compassion continue and to share the khair. So I encourage each and every one of us, if you haven't yet, go to Islamic Relief and sponsor an orphan with as much as you can. Bring some smiles to those faces. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept that from us. Go ahead and conclude with that. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.